The course was called English Composition, and I had to write 3 papers. The topics for the first 2 were already given to me, and they were written and submitted. The third paper had to be written on any topic I could think of. This work should have been completed during my first year, but due to all the training hours I accumulated in the Army, I was accepted straight into my second year. However, it turned out that graduating required certain basic credits that were not covered by my military experience, and composing in English was one of those courses. The problem was that I couldn't think of anything that the teacher hadn't already seen 1,000 times. I sat in the kitchen at the table, with my elbow on the table and my chin in my hand, looking at my notebook, trying to figure out what to write about. Nothing came to mind. Nothing caught my attention. I noticed that I had written the word nothing on a piece of notepad and underlined it several times. I looked at this word and thought about it. It was such a negative word. What did it mean? Nothing. Why do we have such a word? It meant the same thing as a dozen other words. As I looked at it, other similar words began to come to mind, and without understanding why, I wrote down under it, 0, no, 0, and nothing. On a whim, I opened the dictionary and looked up the definition of the word nothing. There were many of them, and they were all negative. I began to wonder if it was possible to use this word in a positive way. Is it possible to use it in a context that isn't entirely negative? Almost instantly, I remembered my English literature course. One of the works discussed was Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. I smiled when I remembered this. Much ado about nothing. Much ado about nothing. Much ado about nothing. Curiosity led me to open the book, Bartlett's famous quotes. Wow, pages 1399 and 1400, a page and a half devoted only to the word nothing. What if? Write a paper on the topic nothing. Come on, think about it, Bobby. You have to come up with something worthy. At that moment, the front door opened and Nancy entered the house. How's work going, Rob? No way. For some reason, it was as if my brain had switched off. It's probably worth clarifying here that my name is Robert Allen Denton, Jr., and my roommate is my wife, Nancy. I usually call myself Bobby, but depending on who I'm talking to, my name is Bob, Rob, Jr., or Al. Don't ask why other people call me different names because I don't understand it myself. I'm 24 years old and a third-year student at Metro State College in Denver. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college, so at 18 I let an Army recruiter talk me into joining the Army for educational benefits, and 2 days after graduating from high school, I was on a bus headed to Fort Knox, Kentucky, for basic training. After the training course, I went to Fort Lee, Virginia, for quartermaster training, and then traveled around the world a little. Korea, Japan, Okinawa, Washington, Fort Lewis, and finally Fort Hood, Texas. Having received my leave, I went home, but disappointment awaited me there. On the way to the airport to pick me up, my parents were killed when a truck driver lost control of his vehicle. This led me into deep depression. I was very close to my mom and dad. I ended up spending 6 months getting drunk and complaining about my fate. Damn it, I could afford it. Their life insurance and settlement from the moving company, plus the money from selling the house because I couldn't live with the memories it brought, gave me enough money to stay drunk for the rest of my life. My life might have been short if it weren't for Jasmine Knowles. I was sitting at the bar, finishing my 3rd glass of whiskey on the rocks, when Jasmine came and sat next to me, saying, "Hello, Rob. How are you?" "Not good. And you?" "Differently. They say you're trying to sleep. Why do you care? As I remember, you always considered me a failure." This is not true. As I sat there, I remembered the first time I met Jasmine. I was amazed by her. It took me 2 months to convince her to go on a date. The first date led to several others, and we started dating. We agreed to go to the movies on Saturday, and I told her I would see her at noon on Saturday. She looked at me strangely and said that she thought she canceled our date because she had to go with her parents to her grandmother. I was annoyed at the short notice, but I understood her. Sometimes I also had to do what my parents demanded. When I got home, my neighbor Billy Newbert asked if I had ever been rollerblading, and I said yes. He said his dad got 2 tickets to Skate City, and gave them to him and asked me to go with him. Since Jasmine canceled our date, I agreed. The first person I saw when we walked into Skate City was Jasmine, and she was roller skating with Ronnie Holbrook. He was our neighbor. I didn't like Ronnie. We've fought several times in the past 2 years, and as far as I remember, he was also a bastard. I thought about going up to them and saying something like, "I didn't know your grandma was so ugly," but that would probably lead to another fight with the bastard, which would probably end with us getting kicked out and being forbidden to return. I decided to just ignore them. Jasmine would see me sooner or later and realize she was caught, and that should have been enough to ruin her day. So I ignored them, but they didn't ignore me. 20 minutes after we arrived, Holbrook came up to me and asked if we would have any problems. I laughed and said, "Even if it did matter, you should remember that at the moment the score is 3 in my favor and 2 in yours. And even in these 2 cases, I fought back. But to answer your question, there won't be any problem. She's a lying, sneaky piece of trash, and if you like girls like that, you can keep her." He gave me a look that he probably thought was scary, but looked funny to me, and I walked away from him. Soon he and Jasmine left. When I got home, my mom said Dick Moore called and asked me to call him back. I called back, and he said some guys wanted to get a team together for a softball game at 5 o'clock. I got permission from my mom and told him I would join. I got home around 8, and my dad told me that Jasmine had called twice and wanted me to call her back. I didn't, and she called again on Sunday. Mom gave me the phone, and I said, "What do you need?" "I want you to come to me." "For what?" "I need to explain yesterday." "There is no need to explain anything. You lied to me, broke our agreement, and went on a date with another guy. There's nothing to explain here. Goodbye, Jasmine." She tried to talk to me on Monday and Tuesday, but I just walked away from her. Finally, she understood and left me alone. I dated other girls, but avoided serious relationships. I was eating lunch in the dining room and was sitting alone at a table for 4 when Jasmine sat down across from me. I looked up from the book I was reading, and she said, "Am I punished enough, Rob? Can we get back to each other?" Honestly, I missed her, so I asked, "What are you suggesting?" "How about a movie tonight, and then we'll see." And so we were together again. I never asked about the Ronnie Holbrook incident, and she never offered an explanation. Everything was fine until a certain day. It was lunchtime, and I was waiting for Jasmine in the dining room. I noticed that she was not smiling when she walked towards me and sat down. She looked at me and said, "Sorry, Rob, but I can't date you anymore. I met someone, and there was an instant attraction between us. A week before the prom, and you know I probably won't have time to find another girl." "Thank you, Miss Knowles," I said and walked away from her. I couldn't find another girl and didn't want to go alone, so I skipped my prom, and now 4 years later, she suddenly cares about what I drink. I never said you were a loser, Rob. But that's exactly the impression I got. Damn it, Rob. I was young, growing up, and making mistakes, just like everyone else on the planet. Are you going to tell me that you were perfect and never made mistakes? Hardly. Finish your glass and let's get out of here. Where will we go? To the party. If you're going to drink, at least among friends. It turned out that it was a birthday party for Nancy Newbert, who was our classmate, although her name was now Nancy Aldridge. There were several other classmates there, and it was like meeting old friends. I was talking to Billy Newbert, Nancy's brother, and he asked me what my major was. My specialty. Isn't that why you joined the Army? To afford college? Oh, yes, that's right. I took a bit of a break after my parents died. I didn't notice that Jasmine was standing nearby and listening until she said, "We're going to fix this." Billy looked at her, then back at me, and I read on his face what he was thinking. "You too? Again?" I turned to Jasmine and asked, "Are we going to fix this? How are we going to do this?" With special emphasis on we. "The next semester starts in 3 weeks, and we will have enrolled you by then." Billy walked away, and I asked Jasmine, "Are you now deciding how my life will go?" "Someone has to do it if you don't do it yourself, so let it be me." "And you decided that it should be you. Why?" I don't want my husband to be an alcoholic. I want him to achieve something. Wait. You and me? It died a long time ago. In our senior year, as far as I remember. Yes, and we have already discussed this. Do you remember? About being young and making teenage mistakes. I'm not a teenager anymore, and I want what I wanted when I first agreed to be your girlfriend. I want to be with you. Have you ever felt like you didn't know what to say? That's exactly what happened to me at that moment. Finally, I was able to say, I'm not an alcoholic. Maybe not yet, but you are moving in that direction. I know your parents' death hit you hard, but ask yourself, what would they think about the way you are living your life now? Do they look down on you and ask themselves where they went wrong? Do they look at each other and say, we didn't raise him like that? It hit me. This hit me hard. When I left that party, I had a date with Jasmine the next evening. It led to several others, and I actually signed up for the next semester, and a month later Jasmine moved in with me. Jas had just graduated and accepted a job at a local law firm as a paralegal. Everything was going great until 3 weeks before the end of my first year. It was Saturday morning, and we had just finished breakfast at the Village Inn when she said to me, I'm moving today. I have already found a place to live. I just looked at her and didn't say a word. I took the check, went and paid it, and then headed out. She was still sitting in the booth when I went outside. I had already started the car when she ran out and got into the car. Were you going to leave me here? Yes. She didn't say another word on the way to the apartment, and I was silent too. She started packing her things, and I tried not to disturb her and ignore her. She packed all her bags and was ready to leave, but I stopped her. I extended my hand and said, Key. She looked at me, then took the keys out of her bag, took off the apartment key, and gave it to me. I want to remain friends, Rob, but I met a really interesting person at work, and I don't think it's right to date him while living with you. I didn't say a word. He simply turned his back to her and walked into the kitchen to grab a can of cola from the refrigerator. When I opened it, I heard the front door slam shut. I sat down on the sofa and stared at the wall. I am human, and my thoughts were about what was wrong with me. I was loving and considerate and thought I was good at satisfying her sexually. I couldn't understand what my mistake was, but I couldn't deny the fact that she was gone. I finished my Coke and was about to leave the house and go to Bud's when I found myself thinking, oh no, Bobby, we don't do that anymore. I finished my sophomore year and signed up for summer classes. I kept in touch with classmates I met again at Nancy's birthday party, and we got together from time to time. After one of these meetings, I ended up in bed with Nancy. She caught her husband cheating and kicked him out of the house. That night turned into a relationship with benefits. We liked each other, but we both knew there wasn't enough spark between us to continue. We both loved sex, and that was enough for us at that time. Plus, I wanted to focus on my studies and graduate in 2.5 years, so I didn't want to waste time looking for a woman for a long-term relationship. Of course, fate decided otherwise and told me, I don't care about your desires, what matters is what I want. It had been just over 5 months since Nancy and I became sex partners when I heard the famous line, we need to talk. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll say it straight. I am pregnant. As far as I knew, I was the only man Nancy had dated, so I did the right thing and made her Mrs. Nancy Denton, and she moved in with me. About 5 months after the wedding, I was sitting at IHOP eating lunch when Jasmine walked in, saw me, and came over to sit down. How are you, Rob? Fine. Why did you marry Nancy? What do you care about? Listen, I know I ruined our relationship, but I've always cared about you, and I don't want you to be used. Accept me, right? Okay, I probably deserved it, but the question remains, why did you marry Nancy? There was no need to prevaricate, because anyone with a head on their shoulders could look at Nancy's condition and count on their fingers. I married her because she got pregnant. Are you absolutely sure that the child is yours? Why are you asking me such a question? Everyone knows that she has been dating a married man with whom she works for 2 years. They have been having an affair for a long time. Bullshit jaws. I can confirm all her actions. We go to work at the same time, and she always gets home before me. They work together, Rob. They have long lunches several times a week. He is married, and he cannot marry her if the child is his. It might be your child, but if I were you, I'd check it out. Long lunches? How do you know this? We work in the same place, Rob. I'm sure you knew that. No, I didn't know. I still don't understand why you care about my marriage to Nancy. It's simple. If she's with you, I won't be able to be with you. I laughed. Seriously, Jas, you've already been with me 3 times, and she threw me into the trash 3 times. Why did you suddenly decide that you would have another chance? I just know, Rob. I just know. I didn't answer, but questions began to swarm in my head. Is Nancy cheating on me? If so, is the child mine? I won't be able to answer this question until I take a paternity test, but I could check if my wife was cheating on me now. I was far from rich, but financially stable, so I contacted the detective agency Spencer Investigations and started the verification process. 2 weeks later, I received a report that showed Jasmine was right. During the first week, Nancy and James Augustus met for lunch at the Quality Inn on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. In the second week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. By bribing 3 receptionists, I arranged for couples to be directed to rooms where Spencer Agency employees had installed listening devices. I couldn't use these recordings in court, but that didn't matter to me. This was the absolute proof I needed to understand the truth. I listened to them more than watched them because I wanted to hear what Nancy had to say. I was surprised when none of them spoke ill of me. I was mentioned only once when Augustus asked, "Are you sure your husband doesn't know about us?" "I'm sure, darling. He doesn't have the slightest idea." My next visit was to the lawyers of the firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. I laid it out to Stanley Howe, and he explained my options. Everything turned out to be not as bad as I expected. She had a job, and I was an unemployed student, so I was not threatened with alimony. The issue of child support will arise only after the birth of the child. A child problem will likely delay divorce until a DNA test can confirm paternity. The most difficult issue will be the division of property. It would most likely have to be split in half, and the lawyer wasn't sure if the funds I had before my marriage to Nancy would be excluded in the absence of a prenuptial agreement. I decided I wouldn't let it become a problem. Nancy didn't know how much money I had, so I'll move it and hide it. The lawyer also informed me that I could sue Augustus for breaking up the family relationship, and could also possibly sue her employer if their policies and procedures said anything about employee relationships. After reflection, I decided to leave the employer aside. If I sue them, Nancy could lose her job, and I didn't want that. If the child is not mine, she will need to take care of it on her own. I asked a lawyer to draw up divorce papers citing infidelity as the reason, but asked him not to file them with the court yet until I gave my permission. When I returned home, Nancy was there. She came up to me, hugged, and kissed me. I kissed her back, and she said dinner was ready. We sat down to dinner, and she asked, "How was your day?" "A little restless. Let me ask you a question. It's about one person you work with. A guy named James Augustus. Do you know how much he earns?" "Why are you suddenly asking such a question?" "I'm trying to figure out how much I can get if I sue him." "Sue him? For what?" "I think the legal term is the destruction of family relationships. Today I had lunch with an old school friend, and he told me about your affair with this man. They say this has been going on for 2 years. I heard that he was married, and I started having very bad thoughts. Very, very bad thoughts. For example, that being married, he will not be able to marry you if it was he who became pregnant. Then a thought occurred to me. Perhaps Nancy married me because she could not marry the real father of her child. Naturally, I have to wonder, is this my child? Nancy's face turned pale as I spoke, and I said, "So let's get back to the original question, Nancy. How much does your lover earn? I don't know who told you this nonsense, but Jim is just a work colleague." "Let me clarify. You and Augustus are just colleagues, and that means that whenever you are together, it is for work matters." "So, that's right." So, if I call your employer, they will confirm that you were conducting company business when the two of you checked into the Quality Inn on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday of the week before last, and on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of last week. Damn, what a relief to know it was just for work. Sarcasm is not your strong suit, Rob. Fine, you caught me. What now? Divorce, and then we'll wait until we can do a DNA test to see if I'll be a partial father or not. Divorce is not necessary, Rob. This is usually exactly what happens when one spouse cheats on the other. Didn't you divorce your ex when you caught him cheating? Do you think I'm an idiot, Nancy? If you've been cheating with Augustus for 2 years, that means you've been cheating on your husband. Just 6 months after the divorce, you and I started a relationship. Did you divorce him for cheating when you cheated on him yourself? I know it sounds strange, but it's not what it seems. First of all, I haven't seen Jim for 2 years, just about 14 months. When I found out that Mike was cheating on me, I decided to take revenge by giving what he considered his to someone else. That someone became Jim, and although it wasn't my intention, we fell in love and decided to get married. I divorced Mike, but when the divorce started, Jim's ex-girlfriend told him she was pregnant, and he was the father. Jim took responsibility and married her. He doesn't love her, but he's crazy about his son. They did a DNA test, and the boy was indeed his. He won't leave her because he doesn't want to be only half a father. We still love each other, but we can't be together. Ironically, the same thing happened to us. I understand how it happened, but it doesn't change anything. Does it matter that I love you? No, it doesn't. We agreed a long time ago that there is no spark between us, and that all we have is friendship with benefits. That was then. The longer we were together, the stronger my feelings for you became. When we got married, it was because I wanted to be your wife. Yes, I used pregnancy to make this happen, but only because we thought there was no spark between us. I was sure that I could make you love me if we were together. I thought it was worth it. If I didn't have feelings for you, I would not marry. Now I love two men equally and want them both in my life. My solution to this problem is to see one and live with the other. I didn't expect you to find out. But that's exactly where we are now, Nance. I found out. Now the question for me is, what to do about it? How about doing nothing? Why not leave everything as it is and try to love me the way I loved you? You can't be serious. Stay with a woman who thinks it's okay to love another man and sleep with him 3 times a week. This won't happen anymore. Now that you know, it forces me to make a choice, and I choose you. While you're thinking about what to do, think about this. I've never turned you down when you wanted to make love, and in fact, I initiate it more often than you do. Have you ever noticed a lack of love or affection on my part? No, because I love you, and I've shown it every day since we said yes to each other. She was right about all of this, and before talking to Jasmine, I thought I was doing great. Nance was a great housewife, good in bed, and always did her best to show me that she cared about me. And as difficult as it was for me to admit it to myself, I loved 2 women. I loved Nancy, even if she didn't notice, but I also loved Jasmine. Always have, and probably always will. The only difference between Nancy and me is that I didn't sleep with the other love of my life. But this difference was key. I didn't do this because it would be wrong. I made a commitment to Nancy, and that meant my feelings for Jasmine had to be put on the back burner and left there. I thought for a long time and finally made a decision that I hope will not be stupid. You've lost my trust, Nance. If I stay, I'll watch you like a hawk. Every time you come home late, I'll wonder if you've seen him. You can come up with an excuse for being late, and most likely I will check if it is true. If you go shopping and are away longer than I think necessary, I will check. If you say you're going to Mom's to help with something, I can call to make sure you're really there. Could you live like this? I could, if that's the price I have to pay to stay with you. And then the most important thing. You will be on probation until the baby is born and the DNA test is done. If the child is not mine, you and I are done. You have to live with it, knowing that it will hang over your head. Do you still want to stay? I'm sure the child is yours, so it won't be difficult for me to hold on. So I let it go, and over the next months Nancy did everything she could to show me that she loved me. As promised, I kept checking on her, but she never did anything wrong. Jasmine continued to keep me informed of what was going on at her job, and from what she said, Nancy had finally ended her relationship with Augustus. Jasmine kept in touch because she was sure the baby wasn't mine, and as soon as I had proof of that, I would leave Nancy and Jasmine would be there to mend the pieces. I want to point out that I didn't give Jasmine any hope, but I didn't push her away either. Pregnancy had affected Nancy's hormones, making her especially needy for intimacy, and I was exhausted. The woman was literally exhausting me, and I wondered whether I would live to see the birth of the child or whether I would end up in a coffin. School was going well, and thanks to the courses I took online while in the military, I was on track to graduate in 2 years instead of 4. Nancy and I had an active social life and attended parties and barbecues hosted by friends and classmates. About a third of them included Jasmine, and I tried to stay close to Nancy. I didn't know if Jasmine would get into a fight with Nancy, but I wouldn't count on it, so I stayed close. We also attended several social events organized by Nancy's employer. They showed me Augustus, and I noticed that they didn't even look at each other, let alone talk. Luckily, several of my classmates worked there, so Nancy had no way of knowing for sure which of them reported on her. Everything was going well, and then, as usual, everything changed. Augustus's wife, Joan, died in a car accident, leaving him a widower and single parent. My source was Jasmine, and after she told me about it, she said, "Now he's free to marry again, so maybe you should start keeping an eye on Nancy more closely." I thought this was good advice, but did nothing until Jas told me that Nancy and Augustus had started meeting at dinners again. She clarified that these were not such long lunches as before, but they still saw each other. Another check to Spencer investigation showed that they did have lunch together, but other than holding hands and exchanging kisses, nothing else happened. I decided not to wait and see. The day I received the report from Spencer, I addressed Nancy during dinner. "I once told you that you were on probation and that I would keep an eye on you. Can you explain the dinners with Augustus, the holding hands and kissing?" "I'll explain. I committed to stay with you, but you gave me no commitment in return. In fact, you made it clear that if the child is not yours, you will leave. And you even hinted that even if the child is yours, you still might not stay. I am absolutely sure that the child is yours, but there is still a small chance that it is not so. When Jim lost his wife, he came to me and asked if there was a chance that we could get back together. I told him there was a small chance, a very small chance that it could happen, and I explained the circumstances to him. He prays that the child will be his and you will leave me. Holding hands and giving him a few kisses so he doesn't leave me is my way of having a backup plan if things don't work out the way I hope. What could I say to this? I didn't give her much hope that we would stay married. She tried. I have to give her credit. She did everything to show me how she felt about me, so why didn't I even try to meet her halfway? I honestly didn't know, but I suspected that somewhere in the back of my mind there was a small corner that held the thought, once a cheater, always a cheater. How to get rid of such a thought? I may not be able to remove it completely, but I could try to ignore it, and I could make Nancy's life a little easier. I won't go anywhere if the child is mine. If this is my child, you will stay with me. She smiled, sat on my lap, kissed me, and said, "Then you are stuck with me because you are the father of my child." And I was. An 8-pound, 4-ounce boy, whom we named Robert Allen Denton Roman III, was born, and a DNA test showed that he was indeed mine. According to Jasmine, after Nancy returned to work from maternity leave, Nancy and Augustus no longer even saw each other for coffee in the break room, let alone lunch together. 2 days after the baby was born, Jasmine called me and asked if the baby was mine, and I had to tell her the truth. "I won't have a chance to be with you anymore, will I?" "It seems so, but you've already had 3 chances and none of them worked. So what makes you think the 4th one will work?" "I just know, Rob, I just know." I just smiled and thought to myself, "You'll never know, Jas. That train has already left. Of course I was wrong. A year after returning to work, Nancy and Augustus disappeared in an unknown direction. When I got home from work that evening, I found a note on the kitchen table that only said, "The baby is at Sally's." I had just finished reading the note when Sally called and asked when I was coming to pick Trip up. I didn't suspect anything. I thought Nancy had to go shopping and left Trip with Sally. When I arrived at Sally's, I asked her what Nancy said when she left Trip. She just said that she needed to do something and that you would take the baby. Nancy didn't come home that night, and the next morning I had to call work and arrange time off to take care of the baby. When midday came and Nancy still had not returned, I decided to call the police. I was about to answer the phone when the phone rang. I answered, and it was Jasmine. She asked if Nancy was okay, and I had to tell her I didn't know. Did she tell you why? Why what? Why did she come and quit? No notice, just left. I haven't seen her since she left for work yesterday. This is bad. I feel something is wrong. Jim Augustus also quit. I think I better call the bank. We'll contact you later. I called the bank and found out that Nancy had withdrawn all the money from the accounts. Not a problem, because most of the money was hers. Back when I was discussing divorce with a lawyer, I moved most of my money so Nancy wouldn't have access to it. I added money to my accounts twice a month, and Nancy thought it was financial help for my studies. After calling the bank, I called the 3 companies that issued our credit cards and canceled them. According to the operators I spoke with, the cards were not used. I arranged for a replacement and then got busy feeding my son. We played with him until he was tired, and then I changed him and put him to bed. After that, I opened a beer and sat down to think about what I should do now. Looks like I'll have to drop out of school, at least until I figure out a way to deal with Trip. In the morning, I will start looking for a kindergarten. Then I'll have to stop by the college and see if I can salvage anything from the semester. I spent the rest of the day doing housework and taking care of Trip. I went to bed, and as my head hit the pillow, I began to wonder what kind of woman would abandon her own child. I hoped that wherever he and Augustus ended up, something really bad and painful would happen to them. Trip woke me up at 6 in the morning. I changed his diaper and was making breakfast when the doorbell rang. I put him in the playpen that we put in the dining room and went to the door. I opened the door and Jasmine rushed into the apartment. Where is he? Has he been fed yet? Does he need to change his diaper? Hush, calm down. His diaper had already been changed, and I was just about to start making him breakfast when you rang the doorbell. Well, come on, start. We have a lot of things ahead of us. Why are you here, and what are you even talking about? I took a day off from work, and now that Nancy is gone, I'm here to win the man I should never have let go of. And I'm not talking nonsense. We need to send the baby to kindergarten. We need to meet with a lawyer and prepare documents for you to obtain sole custody of the child. Shouldn't be a problem considering she dumped him. We also need to get a restraining order to keep her away from the boy. There is no chance that she can prove her worth as a mother after she abandoned him. So first a lawyer, and then a kindergarten in my building. Are you going to tell me what to eat for breakfast? Perhaps later. First you need to take care of the baby. He's not the youngest. He is Robert Allen Denton Roman III. Here they call him Trip. Will I have problems with you? Probably. Let's go back to your first statement. Are you here to win your man? In my opinion, this is quite understandable. I missed you, and now I'm going to get you back. There is one small problem. You assume I agree with your plan, but I don't. Why not? Do you know what the definition of insanity is? It seems not. It's when you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result each time. I don't understand. We got together 3 times, and each time it ended with you leaving me. Same result every time, although I expected something different. It would be madness to try again. Are you going to throw me out the door? Of course not. Then let's get down to business. Feed Trip, we'll meet with the lawyer, we'll get him into kindergarten, and we'll think about personal matters later. Why not obey, I thought. It still needs to be done. I'll do it and then figure out the rest. I called the lawyer I was discussing divorce with, and he said he could see me right away. When I arrived at his place, I told him everything that happened and told him to file for divorce. I understand that nothing will move until she receives the documents, but I'm betting that we won't hear from her, and in a year we can file for divorce because of her refusal. He agreed and said that he would have the documents ready for me to sign by 10 o'clock, and since he needed to be in court at 11, he would file them there. We left the lawyer's office and headed to the building where Jasmine worked. I was hesitant, but Jasmine said she could get Trip into kindergarten there. I doubt HR will think to tell Allison that Nancy is no longer working. Allison? She runs a kindergarten. And what will happen the day she finally finds out? Don't worry about it. I've got it all sorted out. Have you settled everything? Yes, Rob, I got it all sorted out. By then, we had already arrived at her building, and she showed me her parking space. I'll take Trip, and you go across the street to the cafe. This will take about 20 minutes. She returned 15 minutes later, but Trip was not with her. I left it there. They were expecting him today when Nancy was supposed to come to work. We can pick him up at 5 o'clock, when Nancy usually picks him up. We still have a lot to do. We need to go back to the lawyer's office and sign documents, and then call a locksmith to change the locks in the apartment. No need to call a locksmith. I'll just buy everything I need from Home Depot and replace them myself. Fine. Then you need to pack all her things and get rid of them. For what? To make room for my things? Stupid. And then, once her things are put away, we will go to my house and move me to yours. You didn't think. Just shut up, Rob. You know you need someone to help with Trip, and that someone will be me. We'll figure out the rest later. She was right. I really needed help with Trip, at least until I could get back on my feet from the blow Nancy gave me, and by accepting Jasmine's help, I could stay in college. We walked around the apartment, collected everything that belonged to Nancy, and on the way to Jasmine, I stopped by her sister Sally and left all the things there. No one was home, so I just put them by the garage door and left a note asking him to call me back. While Jasmine was packing her things, I called the police and reported Nancy missing. I was told that I needed to come and write a statement. I said I'll come by later. We moved Jasmine's things to my apartment, and I left her there to unpack while I drove to the police station. I filled out a written report, and then a detective spoke to me. He, of course, asked if my wife and I had any problems, and I told him the whole story, starting from the moment she came to work and quit without warning. I also mentioned that her lover also quit, so she is not considered missing. Perhaps not, but we both know that when her family can't reach her, they'll probably call you and say something like, she would never do something like that. She wouldn't abandon her child. Must have done something to her. I'm just trying to get ahead of things. If I wasn't on the list of suspects when they called you, you probably would have wondered why and considered me a suspect in her disappearance. He nodded and said that they wouldn't waste much time looking for her. We'll check on her employer, confirm what you told us, and then notify other police stations and hospitals in case she shows up somewhere. With that over with, I went to college and talked to all my professors and explained why I had missed a day and would probably miss another. They all told me not to worry and that we would find a way to work things out. From there, I went to kindergarten and picked up my son. When we returned to the apartment, I found that dinner was already ready. Jasmine told me that Sally called and asked me to call her back. Jasmine took Trip and I called Sally. What kind of things did you leave in front of my garage? That's all that belonged to Nancy in the apartment. I thought about giving it to a charity shop, but then I decided to give it to you in case she comes back. Will he come back? I told her everything that happened. She would never do anything like that. Abandon your child? I smiled. It was almost word for word what I told the detective that her family would probably say. But she did, Sally, and you can call the HR department at her job and find out that she and her lover, one James Augustus, both showed up and quit without notice. I haven't seen her since she left the baby with you. She didn't call, and all I got from her was a note saying you have Trip. Who was the woman who answered your call? The nanny I hired to look after Trip while I'm at school. This smells like something bad, Robert. Nancy would never do what you say. It was nice talking, Sal, and I hung up. I had just finished dinner when the phone rang. I picked up the phone and said hello. What did you do to my daughter, you bastard? I killed her, and I hung up. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, it was my mother-in-law. Can we have a reasonable conversation, Bob? Of course we can, Mom. What's happening? Sally called and said you kicked Nancy out and dumped all her stuff in her garage. First of all, I didn't kick her out. She appears to have eloped with her lover. It seems. All I know is that she withdrew all the money from our accounts at 9:30 in the morning and went to the HR department at her job to quit without notice. Her lover, James Augustus, who works there, quit at the same time as her. I don't know how you can interpret this, but to me it means that she ran away with another man, and please, please, please don't tell me that this is something she would never do, because it's obvious to me that's exactly what she did. There was silence on the other end of the line before she said, "So does this mean we won't be able to see our grandson?" No, that's not true. You are part of his family, and you can see him whenever you want. Thank you, Bobby. Please, Mom. We put Trip to bed and watched TV until I started yawning. Jasmine noticed this, took the remote control and turned off the TV, and then said, "It's time to sleep, dear. How do we arrange this? I'll take the sofa and you the bed." Don't be stupid, honey. I told you I came to win you. Listen, Jas, she left just 2 days ago. I cannot be comfortable with this conquest of yours. She shrugged and headed to the bedroom. I took a blanket and pillow from the closet and was just about to lay out the blanket when Jasmine entered the room again. She was completely naked. She stood with her hand on her hip and said, "Are you sure you want to sleep on the sofa?" I wish I could say I was firmer, but unfortunately I wasn't. I threw the blanket on the floor and followed Jasmine. She smiled, turned around, and walked into the bedroom with me following behind. And so the next year passed. Nancy's parents heard from her 4 months after she left, but neither they nor Sally told me where she was. A year after her disappearance, I filed for divorce, citing her refusal, and when the divorce was finalized, Jasmine began to insist that we legalize our relationship. I delayed and resisted for the next 2 months until she got tired of waiting. "I need an engagement ring, Rob. You have to make up your mind." "Okay," she insisted, and I had to answer. "You know my position on this issue, Jasmine. You heard my definition of insanity. I'm not going through this again. At least this time we won't be married and won't have to go through this whole divorce nightmare. This is all nonsense, and you know it. As for divorces, I will sign a prenuptial agreement that will give you everything. As for insanity, it won't work. In the other 3 cases, you were the one who waited forever, and I was just a girl who was insecure and always looking for something else. In this case, I am the one who seeks eternity, and you are the one who hesitates so that you do not repeat the same actions." I sat and looked at her, shaking my head, when she suddenly announced, "I was hoping you'd do it yourself, but it looks like you're not going to." I didn't really want to do it this way, but it looks like I'll have to. I am pregnant. I thought you were on birth control. I am, but this is not 100% protection. This is written right on the box. I wanted to say, "Are you sure this is my child?" But I knew that this is so. She could have left me for someone else, but I knew she would never cheat. I sighed and agreed to the wedding. It was a simple ceremony at City Hall. We had a reception at the American Legion Hall, and at the reception I learned how Jasmine had gotten Trip into daycare so easily, even though Nancy no longer worked there. The Allison Jasmine was talking about turned out to be Ellie Martin, one of our high school classmates and a good friend of Jasmine's. Why I never connected Allison with Ellie, I'll probably never know. When we returned home after the reception, Jasmine handed me an envelope. "What is this?" "Read it." I opened the envelope to find a signed and notarized prenuptial agreement that transferred everything to me in the event of divorce for any reason. It's my fault, it's her fault, it doesn't matter. Everything will be left to me. I told you I would do this. Now, how about we go to bed and seal our marriage? Several days passed before I remembered to ask her when her due date was. I don't know. It's all up to you. What do you mean? I stopped taking the pills, and now I'm waiting for you to do your job. You're not. Jasmine laughed and said, That's right. In love and war, all means are fair. I'm off birth control and waiting for you to do your thing. Have you thought about how angry I'll be when I find out that you deceived me? No, why should I? You still win. You've got me and an insurance policy that protects you. What more do you need? Insurance policy. Marriage agreement, dear. You know how materialistic I can be. Do you really think that I will leave you and give up all my property? No, Jose. She dragged me into the bedroom, and by the time she was done with me, I had already forgotten my anger. Tripp got a brother, and 2 years later Tripp and Evan got a sister. After Elizabeth arrived, Jasmine and I decided that 3 children was enough. Nancy never tried to see Tripp. No birthday cards, no Christmas cards, and I don't think I'll ever know how she could just abandon her child. I got half of what I wanted when I wished for something bad and painful to happen to them. Augustus worked at a bank in Seattle and was shot and killed during a robbery. Nancy disappeared, and her parents and Sally never heard from her again. Tripp never knew his mother, although he knows she exists. He is shown photographs of her when he visits her parents. They try to get him interested in her, but even though he acts like he's interested when he's with them, when he gets home he tells me he's not really interested. Why should I care about her if she herself shows no interest in whether I'm alive or dead? I can honestly say that I never spoke ill of his mother to him. He himself realized how much she did not appreciate him. Nancy will never know what she missed by not seeing him grow into a fine young man. Who knows, perhaps she would show up on his doorstep one day. If that happens, I can only hope he slams the door in her face. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.